you help me to go to the next? So I propose we go to the next speaker. So this is Albert about the physics program at CERN.
All right, it's my pleasure to be here and to have the opportunity to talk to you. In fact, it's not a particle physics conference, so don't worry, I'm not going to talk about particle physics. I will actually talk particularly about the complement of what you just heard. You heard about the accelerator, but many of the people who come to CERN, they conduct experiments. And I will talk a little bit about that, particularly the experiments which are now at the cutting edge at the Large Hadron Collider. Let's see. So, but first of all, what are we doing? We are actually a curiosity-driven discipline that is looking at fundamental questions, and particularly in its simplest form, I could say we are trying to figure out what the world is made of, what are the smallest constituents of matter which actually build up everything, this table, myself, you, and so forth. What holds it together? Or what are the forces that are working between these smallest constituents of particles? And also in particular, where did it all come from? In as much as we believe there was a big bang at the beginning, how did it evolve to what we are actually seeing today? This science requires accelerators, which we saw before. These are powerful machines that accelerate particles to the extreme energies. Detectors, which are sitting around the accelerator and looking at what happens when we have collision and what comes out of it. Computing, as you will hear in the next talk, which is a very essential part, and I will touch upon that at different points also in here. And it needs people. In fact, it needs a lot of people. And as you will see, we are very big collaborations of people, very international, worldwide spread, and still, in fact, the people or the collaborations are maybe not as big as we might have hoped. The Large Hadron Collider you heard about, it's a machine that accelerates particles. They are called protons. Protons are constituents of nuclei, of which we are all made, to very high energies. In fact, the Large Hadron Colliders brings them to energies as we had never had them before in a machine, and makes them collide. And in these collisions, we will produce particles, new particles we hope to see, and particularly also, as we saw, the Higgs boson a couple of years back. Our prime physics targets are to understand, and that may be a bit abstract to get here, but is to understand the origin of mass, or why does it come that actually particles have mass, where did that come from? Dark matter, to see what the nature of that is, which we know is all around us, but which doesn't seem to ignore us. And other questions, which are a little more technical, but very fascinating for physicists, like understanding space-time, understanding why we live in a matter world, and where all the antimatter could have gone, and understanding the dynamics at the beginning of the Big Bang. So the LHC is a discovery machine for that. So it's a big project, and I think over the last 10, 20 years we have seen many science projects that became big international projects and collaborations. I think this, the driving or the pioneers in that kind of very international type of collaboration, I think is certainly one of them, or one of the main ones is certainly high energy physics, because we have been forced to do that since, for example, the equipment we are working with is of that kind of size that it becomes not feasible anymore for one particular country, for example, to just build and run that. So technologies and responsibilities in such a collaboration are shared among the collaborators. The technologies are always essentially cutting edge, because we always need to push the technology further to make the quality of the measurements which we want to have. And often it is used, and I will show that, in such kind of experiments, which is then something like a very big prototype for detectors which, with a delay of maybe 5 years, sometimes 10 years, actually make it in the rest of society, particularly the medical sector or the material science sector, as we have seen. The data volume is enormous, and I will give some numbers, and in the talk after me you will hear even more about that. And therefore we have been driving also at CERN very much what happens in the computing world. The interconnectivity is a must. We are spread all over the planet doing the same science, working on the same experiment with the same data, so communication is very important. And such projects we see also today, even a few days ago when I gave a colloquium in the SQU University here, that attracts young people. They find this fascinating, the way we work and what we want to do. So I'll hope to carry over a little bit of that fascination. But I said I was going to talk about the experiments, and just to illustrate the case of how complicated these experiments are and what they can drive. So these are the two examples which I showed. These are the two, in fact, main experiments at the Large Hadron Collider today. There are 7 in total. These are 2 of them. And as said, these experiments use cutting-edge technologies because they need to be radiation hard, they need to be very pixelized, they need to be responding very fast because they get 40 million interactions per second they have to deal with, and they have to individually separate them. We use powerful magnets, we use cutting-edge technology, data readout, and so forth. And the experiments also produce a lot of data, as I mentioned. In fact, something like 50 petabytes per year per experiment are produced. And for that, there is no single computing center that would be able to deal with these data. So we have already, since more than 10 years, conceived the concept of a tiered centering, where we have 10 big computing centers over the world, and something like 150 tier 2 computing centers, which still has like maybe 500 to 1,000 processors each, which are crunching the data. If we were to actually put all the data in one computing center, as it classically was done with such experiments, even a very big computing center, we would not discover the Higgs boson until 3 years from now. We would not have had it yet because we would not have been able to go through all the data. Detector techniques, these are just some examples of detectors which we are dealing with, like crystal type of detectors, silicon trackers, big magnets, as was said, GEMS, calorimeters, muon chambers, pixel detectors, and in each one of them we are pushing on the technology to get better performance EV detectors, faster detectors, thinner detectors, less material, and as said, that will find its thing. This is the experiment as you see it. So it's a large experiment. So typically you have like 15, it's a cylindrical type of experiment. You have like 15 to 20 meters diameters and 30 to 40 meters long. And you see in the middle the beam line and 2 people there still fixing some things. When they move out, this experiment will close and will be fully surrounding the interaction region. This is some numbers on the type of geographical environment we're dealing with. This is one experiment. It's called the CMS experiment. CMS stands for compact muon solenoid. That's not so important here. It's a collaboration of 3,200 scientists and engineers that are running this experiment. And we have like 800 PhD students in that experiment, which come from 190 institutes and 42 countries, spanning from New Zealand to Brazil and everything what is basically in between for this experiment. And you see a picture of many people on there, but it's only a small fraction of the experiment. Also, I should say, we still have more subjects in science to be done with this experiment than what the 800 PhD students and their supervisors can cover. Now, as far as the Middle East is concerned, Egypt is a member of this experiment with like 10 institutes and an organization called NHEP, and they are since many years with us already. Morocco is a member of the other experiment I mentioned, Atlas, and, but that was all till recently. But since about a year or a bit over a year, we are having intensive discussions with a number of other states in the Middle East, particularly Qatar, as we have already very advanced agreement with them, and they're sort of already working with us. Bahrain is one, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. With Lebanon, we will probably get an agreement in a couple of months from now, and they will join us. Jordan, Oman showed interest while I was here, Palestine region, and so forth. But there is room, because in fact these collaborations are still essentially open, and they will run for another 15 to 20 years for sure. Now, I can't stop myself of at least telling you something about this Higgs particle, which we discovered, so you can say you saw it while you were here. We produce it in proton-proton collisions. It produced, and it will decay immediately in smaller particles, particles we know. We will not actually see a Higgs particle in our detectors. But from the distributions you see on the right-hand side here, you see where the bumps which we saw above expectation, what the background could be, and these are the signatures for particular decay channels of this Higgs particle. And this Higgs particle, it's not a particle physics talk, so I won't explain the details of that, is very, very essential for our fundamental understanding of how the universe came into being. So it was really a milestone discovery which got rewarded at this point for the two theorists, which in fact proposed this particle possibly to exist in '64, when maybe not many people were believing that. But as you see in the green lines, it was said this prize could only be given because this particle was finally confirmed by the two ATLAS and CMS experiments at CERN's Large Hadron Collider. So what we will be doing, for those countries of interest in that, what we'll be doing, we will be studying this brand new particle. This is a particle which has never been seen before, which has a quantum numbers, and I won't go into details. It is completely an unusual particle, what has been found. And we expect that this will teach us a lot on also the other questions which are brought up there, for example, connection with dark matter or so. And that is part of our program, what we're going to do. We're going to study that in detail, as well as look at the other things which I mentioned before. So that's ahead of us. And finally, to stop with that, I would say that what we do, and what was also somewhat mentioned in the previous talk, has consequences for the society also later in just the building of these detectors. For example, detecting these particles involves a certain way of imaging, certain ways of detecting. And what we built in a big scale and sort of tested is now miniaturized and can be used, for example, in PET scanners to actually scan patients with the doses which is 100 times less than with detectors that were used before. So that's one of the benefits, just one example. So the experiments at CERN are large international collaborations. The two largest so far, ATLAS and CMS, have over 3,000 scientists and engineers that come from over 40 countries. These experiments have led to important discoveries, as I meant, for example, the Higgs boson. But the experiments at the LHC are using cutting-edge technologies for detectors, electronics, data acquisition, and computing. The latter you will hear in a moment. These technologies can be used in a next generation in other domains, and they are, as we know, for example, in medical applications. CERN has an active technology transfer policy as far as that is concerned. And when certain directions of interest are being developed, CERN supports that. So, for example, for particular of these semiconductor studies, we have special research lines. The user interconnectivity is a key to the success, and that is actually what has driven the World Wide Web to be invented. It was not an application which came and said, let's do that and let's try that out. It was really the need from these experiments that has driven that invention. All right, I think CERN is now ready for the next stage after this first part of the LHC data, which we have been able to see. And we are going on with a future program for the next 20 years, so we are all quite excited about that at home. And I can just transmit a simple message that Arab states or physicists from Arab states can participate in this project. And as I showed, we have already quite a few connections we are trying to work out. And I'm sure in some future ASRAN meeting, when somebody will talk like me about that, he will show you many more of the Arab states who are parts of these experiments. So take it as an invitation. All right, thank you.
So I suggest we move on. And the